All right. All right. Good morning. If you're watching this video, don't freak out because it's Saturday. Katie and I are we've got some things coming up in our schedule that just it's going to be a little bit more convenient for she and I if I go ahead and record, um, particularly on this day, um, record a message on Saturday and then just go ahead and have that posted and ready to go just for the weekend. Anyways, Katie and I, our niece plays a pretty competitive level of soccer, so we like to spend a lot of time with Katie's brother and his family. Anyhow, I hope this is okay for everybody. I hope that nobody is offended by not having the live stream actually on Sunday morning. But this way you can go and you can watch this at your convenience. Anyways, in the next several weeks, we'll have maybe a handful of times where we're going to need to uh, just do something that's pre-recorded, maybe on a Saturday or whatever. Anyhow, content's the same. It's just the timing's a little bit different. Anyhow, don't really have any announcements or anything for this week, but I just want to go ahead and hop in here. And what I am starting this week is a is a Bible study on the book of Hebrews. Hebrews, if you've never really jumped into Hebrews, really delved into the message of Hebrews, it'll change a lot of the way that you look at church. I studied it so I went to Liberty University for my master's degree, for my Master of Divinity. So your typical church pastory degree or whatever you want to call it. Um, I went there for that, and it's funny because it's this Baptist seminary, and I had come out of a Baptist church, or was in a Baptist church at the time. It's just really interesting how going through the gospel, or not gospel of Hebrews, the book of Hebrews, actually some of the theology and the doctrine that I started learning in the book of Hebrews really started coming against some of the traditional beliefs, not doctrinal beliefs, but just some of the ways that the church interacted with its people and interacted with the world. So I keep wanting to call it a gospel. The book of Hebrews started coming up against it, and I have been on a real journey here as of late, just personally, in a good way, um, just expanding myself in some different ways. Um, one of the things that one of the ways that I'm expanding really is in rearranging my life more around Scripture rather than having Scripture arranged around my life. And here's what I mean by that. Well, I'm trying. Do I want to get into that right now? I'm not going to get into that right now. Um, Maybe I will a little bit later, but I just want to stay focused for what I'm doing for right now this morning. We are just looking at the book of Hebrews, and in the book, so the book of Hebrews, just a tiny bit of background for you here. Just a tiny bit of background. You're not really 100% sure who wrote the book of Hebrews. Most scholars believe there's a range of people, but a lot of scholars believe it was a guy named Apollos who was an early Christian leader, probably written in the mid 60s AD. So to give you a frame of reference, Jesus died in the 30s, so about 30 years after Jesus died. 30, 35 is when this book was written. It was written to the Christian church in Rome. Now, in Rome, you had these people who had converted, right? And there was sort of a hodgepodge of Christian views. A lot of them came out of it were very Jewish in their background, but there were a lot that were more what the term Hellenized, very Greek in their background. So they were Gentiles, right? They weren't Jews who had been converted to Christianity, or Jews who had come to a full faith in Jesus. Some of them were, but a lot of them were just people out there that were maybe worshiping the Roman pantheon of gods and that kind of thing, and they came into the revelation of Jesus from a truly pagan perspective. But some of the ones who came out of the Jewish background really there were some crazy beliefs regarding angels and such that had really popped up. So what was happening in the mid 60s AD? So what another big part of the perspective for this uh, particular study. Trying to keep track of my time. I think I started about 5 minutes ago. I don't want to go too long. In the mid 60s, Nero had begun his persecution of the church, and after the expulsion of Christians from Rome by Claudius. So there was a huge persecution happening. So there was an explosion of Christianity, then there was a huge backlash against them. And there, any number of reasons, but Christianity, to make a long story short, came against the cult, the emperor cult. The emperor believed himself to be a god on earth, and so now you've got something else that's replacing him sort of as the ruler of the world, right? And so there was an awful lot of backlash against Christians, and there was a lot of rumors going around. They said that Christians were incestuous. They said that they were cannibals. A lot of crazy stuff. So Christians were really persecuted pretty badly, and I mean, they were murdered, they were tortured, and it was a pretty brutal time in the life of the church. So the Christian church in Rome was under a great deal of persecution. Many had been considering leaving the church. If you can imagine giving your life to Jesus, and then as a result so you're a good Roman citizen, you give your life to Jesus, and as a result of that, you lose your job, your family, eventually your life isn't, and eventually your life, right? So you're sacrificing everything. So it's not hard to see that if that converting your life to Christianity or converting your faith system to Christianity was taking a huge risk. I mean, you really could be risking everything. Someone who had a great job before converting to Christianity could be shunned by their family, be kicked out onto the street from a comfortable home. Because who's going to rent from a Christian, right? Who's going to rent from one of those dirty, incestuous whatevers? Um, so they would have to get dirty jobs in order to make the ends meet. So imagine you're a guy with a wife and two kids. You convert to Christianity. What does it mean for your wife and your children? It could mean starvation, right? Your wife may be having to do things, and your kids having to do things. You know, people sold their children to try to give them a better life. So now the pressure would really be on to ditch Jesus and go back to a pagan way of life. Um, so in all of this, in the context of Hebrews, the writing of Hebrews, this persecution is going on, and Hebrews is a book that was written to really correct some theology, but mainly as an encouragement to people, to Gentile Christians and to Jewish Christians, so that they wouldn't give up. How many times have we been sitting and reading the Bible sometimes, and man, that was just what I needed to read, right? You're listening to a pastor, or you see something, somebody posts something even on Facebook, like a Christian meme, and you think, man, I really needed that reminder. I needed that boost. Hebrews was the writing of the time that was really encouraging people. So anyhow, we're just going to go Hebrews 1 verses 1 through 4 today, and then I've got some application to pull out. And I actually started this study a while ago. I started it and never really finished it, so I'm kind of coming back to it, and I have written a lot of things that I'm still trying to kind of parse out. Anyways, I'm going to hop in here to some things. So in the introduction in Hebrews 1 verses 1 through 4, I'm going to read that, and then we'll go ahead and kind of hop in. I'm going to break some of the scripture out, and then I got some applications that I want to pull out to you. Incidentally, I also want to note that the book of Hebrews is really one of the books of the Bible that, in my opinion, speaks very clearly to the modern and postmodern church today. Some of the attitudes and some of the sellout mentality of people. The book of Hebrews gives some very clear warnings and very good insights into how we can resist some of those temptations. And we're going to talk a little bit about modernism versus postmodernism today. Nothing deep or heavy, but we're going to talk a little bit about some of that. So Hebrews chapter 1 verses 1 through 4 says, God, after he spoke long ago to the fathers in the prophets in many portions and in many ways, in these last days has spoken to us in his Son, whom he appointed heir of all things, through whom also he made the world. So that's verses 1 and 2. Now this week we're going to talk mostly about 1 and 2, and next week we're going to talk about verses 3 and 4 a little bit more detail. Verse 3, he is the radiance of his glory. So Jesus is the radiance of God's glory, his Shekinah, right? And the exact representation of his nature, and upholds all things by the word of his power. When he had made purification of sins, he sat down at the right hand of the majesty on high. And having become as much better than the angels, as he has inherited a more excellent name than they. So, one of the things I want to just kind of point out here, God spoke, right? God spoke through prophets and in many ways, in many portions early on, and then he communicated himself in one way early on, and then he communicated himself through Jesus later. This is what we call a progressive revelation of the Lord. So the first point I want to make is that God speaks differently as time progresses and his revelation progresses. Okay, the nature of the most recent revelation, Jesus. This introduction is saying that the recent revelation, we go from Torah and prophets, right? So we go from that revelation there to Jesus, but the nature of the revelation of Christ is deity sent from heaven, right? So anyhow, what you've got, verses 1 and 2. Oops, sorry about that. What you've got in verses 1 and 2, you've got an old revelation. Sorry, I'm going to kick my camera. You got an old revelation versus a new revelation. So the old revelation was what the writer of Hebrews said was long ago. Okay, it was to the Father, so to the prophets who spoke to the world. So the revelation, the old revelation, God spoke to prophets, and then who spoke to the world in many ways and at many times, right? The many ways and many times, there was the burning bush, dreams, visions, actually the Psalms of David and Solomon and some of the others who wrote the Psalms. Those were revelations of the Lord. So there's this dude named Harold Aldridge. He said that as to the manner of the divine revelation, it was at many times, and that word is polymeros. That is, it was temporarily fragmented rather than the complete package, and in various ways. A word that suggests, polytropos, a word that suggests a diversity of forms of that revelation. The suggestion brings to mind Old Testament commands, exhortations, stories, visions, dreams, mighty acts, breathtaking theophanies, and a still small voice, to name a few. So the old revelation, God spoke to his people in a ton of different ways, right? So it was really kind of fragmented and scattered the way he communicated, because people are kind of fragmented and scattered, right? I mean, you think about how many times somebody has said something to you. Somebody can tell me something and I might not hear it from them, and then somebody else comes and says the exact same thing, maybe slightly differently, and I hear it from them, but I didn't hear it from this other source. That's this old revelation, right? So the new revelation that they're talking about here in Christ, and this is the verse 2, where it says, in these last days he's spoken to us in his Son. He's spoken to us in these last days, to us, right? In his Son. So the old revelation, God spoke to prophets. He would speak into a certain medium that would then speak to us. Well, here's the thing. God spoke directly to us, right? Instead of being through prophets, he spoke directly to us through Jesus Christ in his Son. So revelation is a progressive kind of thing. It's progressive not in the sense that it moves from false to true, because God has always been true, but it goes from a lesser revelation to a greater revelation. So God used men at one point to reveal himself. It's just pure humans, right? Just me sitting here making a video or whatever, talking to people, right? Once God had prepared the world to be able to handle it, Jesus hits the scene, right? And he's got this greater revelation. And so it goes, we actually talked in that sermon series about where we see Jesus in the Old Testament, right? We think with some of the things that Jesus replaces, the priesthood, the temple, the sacrifice, what else? My goodness, though. So the tabernacle, so many of the things, Torah, the law, Jesus replaces the law. So all these were a revelation. They were a lesser revelation. They were a timely revelation, and they were a good revelation. But Jesus has become the greater revelation. And that's what Hebrews is starting out here trying to make sure that it's very clear in communicating. So the law and the prophets were still true. And all the message of the law and the prophets still is true for that time. Jesus was simply a more targeted revelation of God and his word. So while God revealed himself in those many times, polymeros, and in many ways, polytropos, his revelation was not complete until Jesus became the revelation of God. See, God revealed himself in what was as complete a revelation as it could be because of what we were ready for and what the world was ready for. God revealed himself in a way that he revealed himself in the best way that we could handle, right? That humanity could handle. He used prophets, he used burning bushes, he used dreams, visions, etc. And he still uses some of that stuff too. I firmly believe God speaks in dreams and visions. But the more perfect revelation came when time had come to this point and history had come to this point where Jesus, we were ready to handle it, right? And how well did we handle it, I guess? I mean, he was executed, right? He was murdered, but still, he came right at the perfect time. So God spoke in a lesser revelation to the forefathers through the prophets in many ways, and that lesser revelation in the latter days, the greater revelation is Jesus. God has made Jesus to inherit. So one of the things that we find here is that there's a lot of talk about angels and such in Hebrews. And one of the things that the writer of Hebrews makes clear is that Jesus was for a time a little lesser than angels, but now has this greater place than the angels. And the reason that is because he was going to inherit, right? Inherit from God. He was God's firstborn son. So God has made Jesus to inherit the very creation that Jesus was responsible for causing. Go back to Genesis 1 and John chapter 1, right? 1 Corinthians 8, 5 through 6 says, "For even if there are so-called gods, whether in heaven or on earth, as indeed there are many gods and many lords, yet for us there is but one God, the Father, for whom are all things, and we exist for him, and one Lord, Jesus Christ, by whom are all things, and we exist through him." So Jesus was made to inherit, right? So that's why he was greater than the angels. So God's speaking to us. When it says that God spoke to us, I want to talk a little bit about the word there, because we've talked about the Hebrew word for word is the word dabar, right? The spoken word. There's another word for speaking, right? The act of speaking. The word dabar is it's a noun, and it's a spoken word that expresses a thought. Laleo, to speak, this is the actual act of speaking. And it says that God laleoed to us. He spoke to us. He spoke to us through Christ and spoke to the prophets. That word, when you translate it out, it's very, very active. It's literal. It's very intimate and personal. And so if I say I'm speaking to my wife, that's very personal, right? I'm not talking at her. I'm interacting with her. And that's what the sense of this word is God is, when he is communicating himself, whether it was through the Old Testament, the old revelation, or it's through this new revelation, God's not just talking at you. My dad used to fuss at me. I love my dad, don't get me wrong. But man, I would just feel like sometimes I'd do something stupid because I was an idiot, still am. But as a teenager, wow, it was. You talk about a stir-fried mess. That was me. But my dad, man, he would give me these lectures, and I just feel like sometimes he's talking at me, at me, at me, at me, at me. And he did sometimes. He would be talking at me, just fussing around. But then there would be some times where we would have these really deep, meaningful conversations, right? And I felt like we were interacting, and he almost like, if you ever have you ever had a conversation with somebody where you're just communicating information, but then you have a conversation where you feel like your souls are communicating, right? I feel that a lot with my wife. This speaking, God speaking to us, is really him talking with us, like sitting down over a cup of coffee and really not just trading information, but interacting and being involved with um, a speaking that involves itself in somebody's life, if that makes any sense. Um, so when this talks about God speaking to us and interacting, and it's very personal and it's an intimate kind of conversation, what that means is that God is speaking in a way that we have to understand that he cares very much about who we are, cares about our souls, cares about where we are going, right? When God spoke to the prophets, and when he decided to speak to the world, he did it in intimate and personal ways. He spoke very audibly to a number of prophets, face to face in the Old Testament. Now, they couldn't see his actual face, because to see the face of God um, means that they would die. But he spoke to them, right? And he spoke to us. James 4:8 says that, right? And it's very close and personal. So God's revealed himself through a number of ways, to include, signs and miracles, and he can choose to do so in any way that he chooses. So let me kind of turn the corner here. I've been going probably, I think I've been going about 10 or 15 minutes here. Not bad, not making bad time. I want to get to I want to try to get to a point where, with this Hebrews thing, where I give a little bit of background and then I jump into some um, application. And I want to spend a little bit more time on the now what. So what do we do with all this? Um, and I want to talk about that greater revelation, because sometimes I wonder what we're doing with the greater revelation. Um, and I say that because I wonder what I'm doing with the greater revelation of Jesus sometimes. Here's a thought, and I just want you to think about this, because I've thought about it an awful lot. I wrote this stuff, I guess it's been a couple years ago, and revisiting it now is causing me to really think an awful lot. So we've got, in our current milieu, if you will, in life now, there are different modes of thought. There are modern modes of thought, and there are postmodern modes of thought. We are mostly in this postmodern culture, right? A um, a modern point of view would be a very theistic point of view, or be a very dogmatic point of view, a very black and white point of view. A postmodern point of view throws black and white out the window, right? Postmodern Christians. Well, hold on. Let me just finish out what I'm saying here. There was a time in this world, I think, when things were very black and white. It is or it's not. It's true. It's false. Up is up and down is down, and that's it, right? So the modern thought, right? The modern world would say that there would be a difference between what we call theism and atheism. Theism would be, there is some God. Some God out there exists, right? Atheism would say that there is no God. So theism, some God exists. Now there's a lot that's wrapped up in that, right? That's one side that's very polarized, right? So that would be like your white. Then the atheistic view, I'm going white and like the black and white, right? So the white is the theistic view, oh, white and pure and all this stuff. The black would be atheistic, there is no God. So that's just it. These guys said they were wrong. These guys said they were wrong. Very polarized, very much, there is no in between. Postmodernism suggests that there are levels of correctness and incorrectness. You can be partially right, you can be partially wrong, but we're not all right, we're not all wrong. So there's this postmodernism that we're living in that, um, what's the term? It's relativistic. It's relative, right? So I can believe what I want and be right. This postmodern thought bleeds into a lot of things, right? It has bled into, I remember in the 90s, where, and maybe it started before then, but I remember one time walking into a pizza joint, right? One of me and Katie's favorite pizza joint, and there's this little kids soccer team having their little award ceremony after a season. And please don't be offended by what I'm going to say here, okay? Um, because we got to take care of our kids, and I want them to be valued and feel good about themselves and all that stuff. But we're in there, and this team had this giant box of trophies, right? And everybody on the team, we were in there long enough to watch them call their names. It was really a cute kind of scene. Everybody had called their names. Everybody got to get up and go get their trophy. And but it hit me. I'm like, what did everybody get a trophy for? Everybody got a trophy for what? Um, everybody performed exactly the same, or everybody was equally awesome. And it dawned on me then. I'm like, man, um, I've seen some kids play soccer, and even in some really good leagues, there are some kids that, while they might be awesome, they're just not as good as others. Now, my niece, she's the greatest soccer player on the planet. She's probably is going to go to the Olympics, and she's probably going to be like the greatest soccer player in the history of the known universe. So she always gets a trophy. Um, but but look, man, some of these leagues that are out there, there are kids that really they're on the team, and that's the reward. That should be the reward, because they really didn't do anything. They had other people that performed so far beyond the expectation. Those are the ones that should get a trophy. The people that didn't perform as well, they all get the trophy. I think you see where I'm going, right? If everybody gets a trophy, what's the purpose of the trophy? So everybody's equally good. So everybody's performance was right. So that postmodern thought. Now you look at riots around the country. Those same kids who got trophies for everything and were told they were right, and they got the blue ribbons for this and that, even when whatever they did, it could have sucked, but we wanted them to feel good about themselves. Now they're out there rioting and tearing things up, and you can't tell them they're wrong because they've been told that they were right their whole lives, because my trophies and my ribbons say how awesome I am as a human being. It's a little bit of a rant. I'm going to get off of that. The point here is postmodernism is now something that has leaked into Christianity. The postmodern Christian is caught between two worlds. It's caught between what I call dogmatism and pragmatism. The dogmatism of modernism and the pragmatism of postmodernism. So, dogmatic people stand on what is really true. Black and white really do exist. Right and wrong really do exist. Theism, some God exists. Modernism, no God exists. It says that or postmodernism, modernism, no God exists, and then this atheistic or postmodern view comes against that, right? So God exists, God does not exist. Those are mutually exclusive things, but we have erased the lines of black and white. Okay? Hebrews is speaking into a culture where people could very easily, and this is kind of where I want to draw a parallel to the culture and the time. There were folks who could very easily sell out their Christian faith because of the hardship they were experiencing. Now, I don't want to downplay or sell short the hardship that they were experiencing, because some of these people are being murdered. They're being killed, okay, for what they believe. So it's definitely, when it's a hardship, okay? Um, so I don't want to downplay that, but there are things that are right and there are things that are wrong, right? Um, so dogmatic people stand on what is true, and a person who is dogmatic, right, can say, I know this to be true, and because this is true, that can't be true. And you'll find that even in religion today. Pragmatic people. So you got the dogmatic person, and you got pragmatic people. Pragmatic people who, the word, you think about the word pragmatism, you think about something being useful, right? Pragmatic people, they don't stand on what is true. Pragmatic people stand on what works for them at the time, right? So, as a Christian, what works for me right now? So there's no black and white. Everything's a shade of gray, okay? Right and wrong, well, there's right and there's wrong, but it depends on the situation and it depends on who you're talking to. And my right and my wrong might just be my right and my wrong. It might not be right or wrong for that person, okay? That's the pragmatic view. That's the postmodern view. And the thing that I want to say here is that some Christians are finding themselves in this pragmatic postmodern mindset, right? It's a totally inclusive uh, uh, mindset. There are no lines in religion or gender or even national boundaries. Christianity is as right and true as Satanism is to some pragmatists. And man, I'm telling you, I have seen some discussions in Christian circles in the last 5 to 10 years where there are things that Christians condone, and I'm certainly not saying that we have to like start running out and beating people up for their beliefs because they don't believe like us. But what I want to highlight is that there are certain things that we do have to acknowledge as wrong. Now, we might witness to people based on what I believe something's wrong. I might witness to somebody in a gentle manner and not just, beat them up over their what I'm calling their wrongness, right? If it defies scripture, it's wrong. I'm not going to beat them up over that. I'm going to gently witness to them, but I can't condone, right? I can't condone sin. So, postmodern pragmatic Christianity. Postmodern pragmatic Christianity would say that gray areas of Christianity exist, and this is a mindset that some in the church have fallen into, and I have been in this mindset as well, just in trying to find balance between faith and what am I trying to say? My desire to be loyal to the scriptures and my desire to be loving towards people. There's a real balance that happens there, and it can really fall out of balance if you're not careful. So certain passages in the Bible are true depending on your context, according to postmodern pragmatic Christianity. Is Jesus the only way, the only truth, the only life? There are Christians out there who would say, nah, maybe not. Maybe there's another way. Maybe I can be a good enough person, because you hear that all the time in church. Excuse me. I had a country style donut fritter this morning, and it is just telling me again how good it was. Is Jesus the only way? So a devout and a true Christian would say, yes, Jesus is the only way. Pragmatic Christians might not necessarily believe that or say that or subscribe to that. They might say Jesus is not the life, the way, the truth, and life for everybody, right? Jesus isn't the way and truth and life for all believers. Maybe there's some other emphases that can offset the fact that I don't like that particular scripture, right? And there are beliefs that say that Jesus doesn't necessarily have to be God. Yes, there are supposed belief Christian denominations out there. I'm not going to call any of them out now that really downplay Jesus as God. So, wrapping this thing up. Where am I on time? Not too bad. Not too bad. I think I'm doing okay here. The postmodern view of religion would further suggest that everyone's God. Now, this is Christians looking at another faith, another religion. Whether they exist or not, that they can all coexist peacefully. Have y'all ever seen those coexist signs with all the religious symbols? Um, they could coexist and live in harmony on the planet, but they cannot hold the same beliefs. They can coexist and care for one another as human beings and in love towards another, but they cannot commingle their religious thought. And that's unfortunately what I think happens when you see the coexist bumper sticker saying we should all just believe the same things and we'll all be okay. I mean, if that's really what you want, if you want to believe in everything, you might as well believe in nothing, and you'll be just as well off eternally. So we know this is crazy, that religious thought can just all coexist. No Muslim would look at a Christian and say that our beliefs can coexist and be exactly the same, because they don't believe the same thing about us as Jesus. Mormons don't believe the same thing as Christians about Jesus. So to say that we can all just coexist, um, that our religious beliefs, our spiritual beliefs can coexist is really not, it's not logical. As people, I can sit in the same room with a Muslim and a Mormon and have conversation and care about them, but I could never take my religious beliefs, my beliefs about Christ and eternity, and look at them and say, oh, well, we just believe the same thing. It's just a little bit different. I can't do that because they wouldn't either. That would just be kind of crazy to do that. Um, I am of the opinion that this postmodern outlook on religion that we have found ourselves in the church and in across culture, of North American culture in general, is simply trying to help people to relate to one another peacefully. And that's a good thing. I don't have a problem with that. I don't have a problem with people saying, let's exist and live in peace with one another. I have a problem when somebody says that we have to agree on 100% of everything. And I struggle with that. You know, in today's political climate, oh my gosh, it is so polarized. And I'm not going to go in but so much on this, but it's getting so bad that people say, whether you're going to vote for this guy or this guy, if I'm a fan of one presidential candidate and you're going to vote for the other guy, man, I just hate you, right? I just have, it's like almost like it's my birthright. I'm entitled to despise you and just want you dead, right? It's extreme. Want to beat the snot out of somebody just because they believe in a different candidate, and that's not right. That's not good. That's not logical. Because at the end of the day, you know, when I go sit out on a soccer field, this this is beautiful. I went to a what do you call them, tournament, right? And soccer tournament my niece was playing in, and lots of teams. So from between here and Williamsburg, I think is what it was. And at the end of the tournament, so my niece's soccer club, they have a lot of different teams, but they have different teams in the same age bracket. At the in the final, my niece's team, the Strikers, her team played another team from their club. They're just that good, right? So they had, both of these teams from my niece's club had both made it to the finals, and they played each other. Did those girls hate each other because they were both trying to win? No. They were friends who were competing, right? They were, at the end of the day, my niece's team would never agree with the other team that they needed to score more goals, right? They wouldn't agree with that. I'm going to score as many goals as I can. They're going to try to score as many goals as they can. But at the end, it was really neat because the parents on the sideline were really impressive too. My nose itches. I'm sorry. The parents on the sideline, whenever those teams play together, I'm too loud. I'm too loud sometimes, and I know I am. But the parents, they'll cheer, but they'll cheer for each other's kids, right? They don't have to be on the same team. They might be competing. They're cheering for the goalie on the other team and encouraging them because they know them all. We're all Americans. We're all humans, right? And it was interesting at the end, both of these teams, they wanted to have their pictures taken together because they just thought it was cool that these two, they were the two finalists in this tournament. And they walked off that field together, like practically skipping off and holding hands, these two teams. So it doesn't have to be this contentious, crazy thing in our lives. We don't have to all agree in order to love one another and coexist peacefully. But so a Christian who takes on a postmodern way of thinking, believing that nothing is concrete and all is relative, would suggest that Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life, but isn't necessarily the truth for everybody. Those who don't believe in Jesus, they're okay. It's fine for them to believe that Jesus isn't God, since that is what is true for that person. Why would you sell out your faith? Why would you take on a postmodern view? Just because I believe that Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life doesn't mean that I think that you are stupid and evil or whatever. It means you believe differently. Now, as a Christian, I'm going to witness to people that don't believe in Jesus. Of course I'm going to do that, right? But I don't do that because I hate them, right? I do that because I love them and I care about them and I care about their eternity. Love's not going to, and if I sell myself out, as a Christian, I do believe I have the truth, the way, the truth, and the life, Jesus, right? How hateful would it be for me to sell out and water down my faith to hand that to somebody else, right? So a watered down faith is not going to help anybody. Does it work? We talked about pragmatism, right? Dogmatic people stand on what's true. Pragmatic people stand on what works. Does it really work to water down our faith in the name of just getting along with people? You can get along with people and live with people and coexist with people in peace and harmony without watering down your faith and selling things out. It's okay to get along. It really is. It's not a bad thing. If Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life, and nobody comes to the Father except through Jesus, then it's okay to say this truth. Is it okay to say that this truth is okay only for those who want to believe it? Okay. Is it less true if someone chooses not to believe it? So if I say that Jesus is the way, the truth, the life, and that person chooses not to believe it, it doesn't make it less true. It means that person has chosen not to believe that, right? It means more love is in order. It means more love and not less, right? So Mr. Postmodern Christian out there, if a person chooses to not believe Christianity and in Jesus as a dogmatic truth, Jesus is still the way, still the truth, still the life, and nothing changes that fact. I can believe all day long that oxygen is not necessary for survival, okay? I can believe that if I would choose to believe that, but I can't make that true. I can look at you and say, you don't need to breathe air. But when I stop breathing, what's going to happen? I'm going to die. Or if anybody else puts a bag over their head, they're going to asphyxiate, right? So what would I do for somebody who put a bag over their head and said, I don't need air to breathe. I'm going to put this bag over my head. What would I try to do? I would probably try to poke a hole in the bag so that they could breathe. So at the end of all of this, I'm going to go ahead and wrap this up. And at the end of all of this, I think the thing that I want to sort of highlight here and just leave you with is just a thought, in this journey that we're on in Christianity. I want to encourage you with this. This is what I want to do. It's okay. It is absolutely 100% okay, no matter what the world tells you. It's okay to say and stand on a truth, right? That Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life. It's also okay for people to not agree with that. You might find yourself having to explain, because I think sometimes the church has done this to itself. It's given itself a little bit of a bad reputation, right? You might find yourself having to explain to a person who's very offended by you saying that Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life, and no one comes to the Father, because the implication is, and the truth of it is, that people who don't have Christ are lost eternally. To some people, that's offensive, right? What do you mean I'm not going to heaven because I don't believe in Jesus? I'm a good person. You might find yourself having to explain to that person, look, this is what I believe. I'm not asking you to believe it, and I'm also not trying to offend you with that. And also, I don't not care about you because I believe that. If you don't believe that, okay. And maybe through those kinds of conversations and those relationships and those relations, maybe that's the kind of thing that helps people to bridge gaps, right? Maybe those are the kinds of things that help people to see that, well, maybe Christianity is not this dogmatic, hateful thing. Because I get it. I mean, that's what the world tells people, is that those stupid Christians out there, they just hate everybody. And they want everybody to not drink and not chew and not date girls who do. Right. So they want everybody to be in this perfect cookie cutter whatever. When the truth of the truth of the matter is that Christianity is as messy as it can get, right? Because people are messy. I don't want to get into too many different topics because boy, well, that's a whole nother that's a whole nother topic in and of itself. But the Hebrews, that introduction to Hebrews was speaking to a culture that was kind of on the ropes. They were being brutalized for their faith, and they were being tempted to sell it out. We're going to be constantly brutalized in our faith. You know, people are so afraid to be called racist when they're not. You know, somebody says, "Well, do you believe in this or do you believe in that?" "Oh, you must be a racist." Well, it's not true, but we're so afraid of being called that. So Christians are so afraid of being called bigoted, right? And so afraid of being called hateful when it's not true. If it's not true, it's not true. Don't accept that for for a truth for yourself. Don't accept somebody's label if you're not being hateful. If you're just saying true things, just do your best to explain yourself, right? No, I don't know. That's kind of all I got on that. So anyhow, tomorrow morning, Sunday morning. So what is today? Today is I'm getting so old. No, the 13th of September. We're not going to have a live stream tomorrow morning. This is going to serve as your churchy experience or whatever. But please be in prayer for our church. Be in prayer for our nation. There's a lot going on. I follow different alternative news streams. And in the coming weeks and months, particularly moving up to the election, there's going to be a lot happening. And maybe this is a really good time to just be on our knees and be in prayer for our national leaders, be in prayer for the election, both for Republicans and Democrats on both sides. Everybody, you know, praying for this to be a good, smooth election. And let's just be aware, right? Be aware of people around us. Be aware of how we can witness to people and be a good, solid witness for Christ. So anyways, that's it. Hopefully this video isn't too terribly long. I don't think it is. I think I did a pretty good job trying to keep it down. So I love you guys. Hope all is well, and I will see you. We'll see you tomorrow. So we'll see you the following week. We will have a live stream then. So love y'all, and y'all have a good one.